From the United States, let's now shift our attention to France. Now remember, France at this point of time is facing a twin crisis. The second wave of COVID-19 infections and a resurgence in Islamist attacks. Now, this has kept the country's President Emmanuel Macron, who famously or infamously said that Islam as a religion is in a bit of a crisis globally, finds himself in the middle of a deep crisis in his nation. Now, he's battling these twin crises. One is of the pandemic and the steadily rising number of infections, and also the terror attacks, a couple of terror attacks that have taken place in the last couple of weeks. Now, Macron, in his political career at this point of time, is facing a make or break moment which will determine the success of his presidency and perhaps even his chances of re-election in the year 2022. Many analysts say that this is the reason why Macron has been making the kind of comments that he's been making. Now, remember, Macron in fact rode to power on a wave of optimism and of hope and of reforms. He was elected as a young leader, a transformational leader who would bring about the country's credibility back on the global stage. But just a year after being in power, Macron was faced with a slew of crises, from the Yellow Vest protesters against his reforms to the nationwide strikes over his new pension system, which will made lots of workers lose a substantial part of their pensions. Soon after the protests and strikes dwindled, the world was hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced a nationwide lockdown. And just as France was beginning to recover from the economic impact of the COVID-19 infections, a second wave has now forced the country to announce fresh curbs. Now, the nation is facing a new challenge, and that is of Islamist terror. Attacks have rocked France after the beheading of a teacher and also of the killing of 3 people inside of a church in the city of Nice. Now, the spring of attacks are being seen as a bit of a reaction to the president's anti-radicalization plan. Now, the plan has been slammed as completely racist by the Islamic world leaders, including Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and the President of Turkey and even of Egypt. Now, Macron's response to the recent terror attacks also faced backlash from other Muslim leaders, prompting for boycott of French goods and also protests from around the world. The current period is the toughest one for Macron since he came to power. A Parisian-based political researcher, Bruno Cotres, claims that Macron has been unable to impose his agenda in the face of the fast-changing events in his nation. This will play a huge role in the 2022 re-elections, where he'll be facing the far-right leader Marine Le Pen. And many say that he wants to take over her agenda. The eyes are focused on the presidential elections, as Macron is hoping to avoid the one-term fate that his predecessors have had. Political commentators Philippe More has said that if Macron wants to get a second term, then he needs to up his game and also show results for the people of France, who are extremely unhappy with his presidency at this point of time. Chevrolet has also said that at this moment, Macron probably has the worst job in the world, and also an extremely difficult job.
La